Welcome to Monk's Temple. As you settle into this moment, let the world outside soften. Perhaps you're in your favorite chair, or already drifting toward rest. Let your eyes close gently. Notice the weight of your body, supported and held. Hear the quiet rhythm of your own breath, flowing in and out, without any need for you to change a thing. There is only now. And in this now, we begin a journey, not to a distant mountain, but into the very landscape of your own awareness. I've walked this path for 35 years, not as a distant guide, but as a fellow traveler through the forests of the mind. And what I've learned is that the peace we seek is not found by silencing life's storms, but by discovering the profound stillness that exists within them. If this space of gentle exploration resonates with you, I warmly invite you to subscribe to Monk's Temple. It is a simple, kind way to ensure this sanctuary remains open to you, a quiet harbor you can return to whenever you need. Let us begin our exploration in an unexpected place. We often hear that we must control our mind. We speak of battling negative thoughts, vanquishing emotions, as if our inner world were a war zone. But the wisdom handed down through Buddhism offers a different starting point. It suggests that the very idea of control is an illusion, a source of struggle itself. The Buddha, in his profound understanding of the human heart, taught a path not of domination, but of intimate understanding. Think of your mind not as a wild beast to be tamed, but as a vast, deep, and sometimes mysterious sky. Thoughts and emotions are not intruders in this sky, they are its weather. You cannot stop the clouds from forming, nor command the wind to cease. But you can learn the nature of the sky itself. Spacious, aware, and fundamentally undisturbed by whatever passes through it. This shift in perspective, from controller to compassionate observer, is the first and most profound step. I learned this not from a book, but from a long, silent winter many years ago. I was staying in a small cabin, and a fierce blizzard blew in, trapping me inside for days. The wind howled, snow blinded the windows, and the world became a roar of white noise. At first, I felt trapped, anxious, wrestling with the storm both outside and within my own restlessness. Then, on the third day, a simple realization dawned. The storm was not happening to me, I was simply in it. The cabin was sturdy. The fire was warm. I had everything I needed. I moved my chair right up to the window and did something radical. I stopped resisting. I began to watch the storm. I observed the intricate patterns of snow swirling in the gusts, the way the light changed moment by moment. Inside, a matching calm settled. The outer storm and my inner agitation began to feel like the same phenomenon, and by welcoming one, I made peace with the other. The storm didn't stop for days, but my war with it ended in an afternoon. Our minds are like that. The weather of anger, worry, or sorrow will come. Our work is to build a cabin of awareness, to find the seat by the window, and to learn the art of wise watching. This art is what we will explore together. The core concept will gently unfold as the Buddha's graduated training for the mind. But we will not walk it in the usual order. We will wander its paths like explorers in a familiar yet ever-new forest, touching different clearings each night. Tonight, let's begin with a principle that is often placed later, but which is, I believe, the most accessible door, the cultivation of wholesome ground. Before we can skillfully relate to difficult thoughts, we must have somewhere else for our attention to reside. A mind left fallow will naturally scratch with the weeds of worry and repetition. But a mind tended, seeded with intentions of goodness, becomes resilient soil. The Buddha spoke of cultivating thoughts of kindness, of generosity, of compassion, not as moral commandments, but as practical psychology. You are giving your mind a healthier, more nourishing place to dwell. It is the mental equivalent of planting a fragrant garden outside your door. You will still notice the weeds at the edge of the path, but your primary attention, your delight, is in the lavender and rosemary, the bloom of the peony. Their scent becomes the dominant experience. One of the most beautiful applications of this I ever witnessed came from a bus driver in a sprawling, noisy city. His route was long and stressful, filled with traffic and impatient passengers. He told me he used to end each day filled with a buzzing resentment. Then he started a simple practice. He called it, collecting smiles. His sole task for his shift was not to drive the bus perfectly, but to genuinely notice one person each hour. Not just see them, but truly notice. The elderly man carefully folding his newspaper, the young student nervously clutching her books, the mother soothing a toddler. And he would try, with a gentle look or a kind word, to elicit a genuine smile. He said he'd watch for the moment when the worry lines around a person's eyes would soften, just for a second. He collected those moments. At the end of the day, he would mentally review his collection. Not the honking cars or the complaints, but the 4 or 5 flashes of human connection he had fostered. His inner landscape was no longer defined by the traffic, it was defined by his garden of smiles. He had consciously chosen what to cultivate, and it transformed his experience from the inside out. This practice is always available. You don't need a bus route. You can start as you lie here now. Bring to mind one act of kindness you performed recently. It need not be grand. Perhaps you made a cup of tea for someone, or sent a thoughtful text. Or remember a kindness shown to you, a stranger who held a door, a friend who listened. Don't just think about it. Feel it. Locate the physical sensation that memory brings. A warmth in the chest. A softening in the shoulders. Dwell there for a few breaths. You are not pretending negativity doesn't exist. You are simply watering the flowers in your garden. The more you visit this wholesome ground, the more familiar and welcoming it becomes. When the storm clouds of a negative thought gather, you will have a well-tended, peaceful place to which you can return. This is the heart of the training. Building an inner home that is so anchored in goodwill and clarity that the passing winds of emotion cannot shake its foundation. We are not chasing the weather away. We are learning to live in a house that is sturdy, warm, and filled with light, so we can watch the weather through the window with curiosity, not fear. Let us continue. Having touched upon the idea of cultivating good ground, let's turn our attention to a practice that is often misunderstood, the act of letting go. We hear this phrase often. Just let it go. It can sound like a dismissal, or an impossible task when a thought has its hooks in us. The wisdom of Buddhism reframes this not as an act of dismissal, but as an act of profound recognition. You cannot let go of something you are still clutching. You must first see that you are holding it. This is where the Buddha's teaching on paying no mind becomes a masterful tool. It is not ignorance. It is selective, wise attention. Imagine you are holding a hot coal in your hand because you believe it is a precious gem. Someone says, let it go. But you can't, because you're convinced of its value. The first step is to look closely, with clear awareness, and see it for what it is, a burning ember causing you pain. The moment of that clear seeing is the moment your fingers naturally, instinctively, begin to loosen. Paying no mind is that act of looking clearly at the thought, seeing its fiery, painful nature, and then gently turning your palm to let it fall, not because you are weak, but because you are wise. You withdraw the fuel of your attention, and the thought, like a coal deprived of oxygen, cools and darkens. I once worked with a woman haunted by a decade-old regret, a sharp word spoken to a parent who later passed away. The thought was a permanent resident in her mind, a room she felt obliged to visit and redecorate with pain every single day. She tried to fight it, to argue with it, which only made it more solid. I asked her to try a different approach. For 1 week, she was not to argue with the thought when it arose. Instead, she was to simply acknowledge it with a neutral phrase, "The memory is here." Then, she was to physically get up and go wash one dish in the kitchen. Just one. To feel the water, see the soap bubbles, focus on the simple act of cleansing a single plate. She was not running from the thought, she was consciously choosing to place her attention on a present, mundane, life-affirming task. The first few times, the thought followed her to the sink, shouting. But by day 5, she reported something remarkable. She said, "I acknowledged it, walked to the sink, and as I turned on the water, I realized I'd forgotten what I was even stepping away from." The thought had just stopped talking mid-sentence. She hadn't killed the thought. She had simply stopped attending its relentless performance. By choosing the sensory reality of warm water over the mental replay of a painful story, she allowed the thought to lose its audience, and thus its power. This is the subtle art. Your awareness is the most precious resource you possess. Where you place it defines your reality. A negative thought is a story begging for a narrator. When you pay it no mind, you are not denying the story happened, you are simply stepping down from the role of narrator. You become the audience member who quietly gets up and leaves the theater. The play may continue on the stage for a while, but it is performing to an empty house, and soon, the actors will tire and exit. Now, let us weave in another original story that illustrates this shift. There was a young musician, a cellist, who suffered from crippling stage fright. His anxiety wasn't a vague feeling, it had a very specific, repetitive script: you will forget the passage. Your hand will shake. They will see you fail. This script would run on a loop for days before a performance. He tried to counter it with positive affirmations, which only created an internal civil war. Then, he stumbled upon a different method. He began to treat the anxious thought like a misbehaving member of his orchestra. Instead of shouting it down, he would, in his mind, gently tap his conductor's baton and say, "Thank you for your concern. But you are not the soloist for this piece. Please take your seat." He then would immediately bring his full attention to a single, specific physical sensation, the smooth, cool wood of his cello's neck under his left hand. He would feel every grain, every curve. He'd listen for the faint, resonant hum of the open strings. He paid no mind to the shouting script, he paid full mind to the tangible reality of his instrument. In doing so, he wasn't in a battle with fear, he was in a deep relationship with his music. The anxious thought, having no engagement, faded into the background noise of the hall. He learned that stage presence wasn't about banishing fear, but about being so completely present with the cello that fear had no room to stand on the stage. This is the practice. It is gentle, but it is not passive. It is the active, courageous choice to direct the spotlight of your awareness away from the drama of suffering and onto the simple facts of the present moment. The breath, a sensory detail, a mundane task. You are not suppressing. You are depriving. You are starving the negative pattern of the one thing it needs to survive, your focused belief in its narrative. As you rest here now, you can practice in the gentlest way. Notice the next thought that arises. See it form. Instead of following it down its path, simply label it softly in your mind, thinking. Then, let your attention drift like a feather, down, down, into the physical feeling of your body breathing. The rise and fall of your chest or abdomen. The thought may return. Simply say, thinking, again, and return to the breath. You are not at war. You are a kindly guide, gently redirecting a child's attention from a disturbing shadow on the wall to the real, solid toys in the room. With each return to the breath, you are strengthening the muscle of wise attention. You are learning that you are not your thoughts. You are the aware space in which thoughts come and go. This understanding is a deep well of freedom. It means you are no longer a prisoner of every passing mental event. You are the warden who holds the keys, and you are learning which doors are worth opening, and which are best left closed, their echoes allowed to fade in the empty corridor. Let us continue our journey inward. We've spoken of tending good ground and of letting go through wise inattention. Now, let us explore a concept that often comes first in traditional lists, but which we will visit now, looking deeply at the nature of the thought itself. The Buddha advised contemplating the drawbacks, the inevitable fruits of unwholesome states of mind. This is not an exercise in self-punishment or morbid fixation. It is an act of clear-eyed, compassionate foresight. It is like carefully reading the side effects on a medicine bottle before you drink the entire thing because you like the color of the liquid. Anger, jealousy, obsessive desire, they often come dressed in seductive costumes. Anger feels like righteous energy, like a shield. Lust feels like aliveness, like fulfillment. Worry feels like preparedness, like caring. Our work is to gently see past the costume to the actor beneath, and to understand the script they are truly performing. I want to introduce you to a metaphor I've often used, which I call the dead of the thorn. Imagine you find a beautiful, rose-gold thorn. It catches the light, intricate and compelling. You pick it up, fascinated. At first, you hold it carefully. But soon, you become so engrossed in its beauty that you forget it is sharp. You clutch it tighter. It pierces your skin. The immediate pain is sharp, but you think, it's so beautiful, this pain is part of its value. So you clutch it harder, walking through your day. The thorn goes deeper. It begins to tear at tendon and muscle. Your hand becomes infected, fevered. You can no longer use it to eat, to write, to touch a loved one's face. Yet you still speak of the thorn's beauty, even as your whole arm grows numb and your health falters. The negative thought is that thorn. The initial prick is its first appearance. The infection is the suffering it breeds in your mind and body. The disability is how it steals your peace, your presence, your ability to connect with life. Contemplating the disadvantage is the moment you stop looking at the rose-gold glint and look instead at your own swollen, poisoned hand. It is the moment of truth that precedes the release. I saw this play out with a man consumed by professional envy. A colleague received a promotion he had wanted. The envy was a thorn he carried everywhere. He would recite the colleague's flaws, list his own superior qualities, a nightly ritual he thought was justified, even productive. But he came to me exhausted, with chronic tension headaches and a shortness of temper with his family. I asked him to do a simple, two-part audit for 1 week. First, each time the envious litany began, he was to jot down a single keyword on a notepad. Second, at the end of the day, he was to note the physical and emotional cost, headache for 2 hours. Snapped at my daughter, felt awful. Couldn't sleep, replayed imaginary arguments. After 7 days, he had 2 columns. One was a short, repetitive list of the same jealous phrases. The other was a long, detailed ledger of personal misery, lost sleep, lost joy, lost connection. The contrast was staggering. He was trading hours of his life, moments with his child, his own physical well-being, for the right to rehearse a story that changed nothing. Seeing the true debt of the thorn. The exorbitant interest it was charging on his peace, was what finally allowed him to set it down. He didn't have to force himself to be happy for his colleague, he simply saw that the alternative was bankrupting him. Now, let me share an original story about a different kind of thorn. A gardener I knew was a master of her craft, but she was plagued by a persistent, critical inner voice about her work. That border is messy. The color scheme is off. It will never be as good as so-and-so's garden. This voice was a constant, draining companion. She decided to personify it, to give it a name and a form. She called it, the inspector, and imagined it as a gaunt, humorless man in a gray suit, carrying a clipboard. One afternoon, as she was happily planting a new bed of lilies, the inspector arrived, pointing out a slightly crooked row. Instead of engaging in her usual internal debate, she decided to try something new. She stopped, put down her trowel, and in her mind, she invited the inspector to sit on the garden bench. "Okay," she said silently. "Tell me. What is the actual consequence of this crooked row? Will the lilies not bloom? Will the earth revolt? Will the people who see this garden be harmed?" The inspector, confronted with these literal questions, spluttered. His clipboard offered no answers about actual harm, only vague judgments. She then asked, "And what is the cost of your visit?" I was feeling the sun on my back, the soil in my hands, the joy of creation. You have replaced that with a feeling of lack. What is that worth? By making the disadvantage explicit and specific, the critical thought was robbed of its generalized power. It shrunk from a looming authority to a ridiculous, petty bureaucrat. She could then politely say, "Thank you for your opinion," and return her full attention to the sun, the soil, and the lilies. She had looked the thorn in the eye and seen it was made of paper. This practice requires courage and honesty. It asks us to pause in the middle of the emotional spiral and ask, where is this leading? What is this costing me right now in my body, in my heart, in this precious moment? You are not adding guilt on top of anger. You are bringing the light of consequence into the dark room of compulsion. When you see clearly that the thought of resentment is, in this very moment, tightening your jaw, souring your stomach, and painting the world in hostile colors, you are no longer simply feeling resentment. You are witnessing the cause and effect chain of suffering in real time. This witnessing is the beginning of freedom. The Buddha's authority here is rooted in this unflinching law of nature: unwholesome seeds, when watered with attention, bear bitter fruit. Wholesome seeds bear sweet fruit. The choice of what to water is always yours. As you rest now, you can practice this in a small, safe way. Bring to mind a minor irritation from your day. Not a huge anger, just a pebble in your shoe. Observe the thought. Now, scan your body. Do you feel a slight tightening anywhere? A change in your breath? A faint mental frown? That is the thorn's prick, the first installment on its debt. Simply see it. Acknowledge the connection. This thought is creating this tension. There is no need to judge it or yourself. Just see the relationship. In that seeing, you are no longer fused with the irritation. You are the scientist noting a fascinating correlation. This slight distance is the first step in withdrawing your energy from the pattern, in stopping the debt from compounding. We have explored preparing the ground, letting go, and seeing clearly. Now, let us move to a practice that is like changing the very climate of the mind. The Buddha taught that when the mind is restless, scattered, and hard, like a field of dry, cracked earth, trying to plant a single seed of peace is very difficult. First, you must change the condition of the soil. You must invite a softening rain. This is the practice of deliberately relaxing and soothing the entire thought process. It is not about replacing one thought with another, but about shifting the fundamental quality of your consciousness from one of contraction to one of expansion, from brittleness to fluidity. I call this the alchemy of atmosphere. Imagine your mind is a room. A stressful thought is like someone shouting in that room. You could try to shout louder to drown them out, which is what we often do with forced positivity. Or you could try to forcibly eject them, which is suppression. But the method of relaxation is different. It is like slowly, gently, filling the entire room with a pervasive, beautiful fragrance, like sandalwood or fresh rain. The shouting doesn't necessarily stop immediately, but it now exists within a much larger, more pleasant context. Its sharp edges are blurred by the soft mist. Its urgency is diluted by the spacious scent. Gradually, the shouting may lower to a mutter, then a sigh, then it may forget why it was shouting at all, lost in the new atmosphere you have created. The primary tools for this alchemy are the heart qualities the Buddha emphasized: metta, loving-kindness; karuna, compassion; mudita, sympathetic joy; and upekkha, equanimity. We will focus on the first, as a gateway. Metta is not a sentimental feeling. It is a deliberate intention of goodwill, a wish for safety and happiness, starting with yourself. You are not trying to manufacture a gush of emotion. You are planting a seed with words and allowing the feeling to follow in its own time, like planting a bulb in autumn and trusting the spring. I learned the power of this from a most unlikely teacher, a gruff, retired ship's engineer who came to the temple with chronic pain and a fiercer chronic anger about his failing body. He scoffed at poetry and gentle talk. So, I framed metta as an engineering problem. Your mind is a noisy, overheating engine, I said. Anger is the friction. These phrases are a cooling lubricant. We're not fixing the engine, we're changing its operating temperature. This made sense to him. He began, reluctantly, to direct the phrases to himself: may I be free from this tension. Not, may I be happy, that felt false. May I be free from this tension was a mechanical wish he could get behind. He would repeat it like a mantra, focusing on the wish rather than any expected feeling. Over weeks, he reported something curious. The pain hadn't changed, but his relationship to it had. The white-hot sphere of anger that surrounded the pain had cooled to a manageable warmth. The atmosphere of his mind had changed from one of relentless war to one of strained, but genuine, truce. The shouting in the room was still there, but the room was no longer a bare, echoing chamber of rage. It was now a space that also contained a steady, cooling intention of care. That change in atmosphere made all the difference. Let me share another original story, this one about a schoolteacher. She loved her students but was overwhelmed by the chaotic energy of her classroom, which would leave her mind feeling like a shaken snow globe long after the final bell. Her thoughts were scattered, ricocheting. Trying to focus on one thing felt impossible. She discovered her method of changing the atmosphere through sound. She bought a small, low-toned singing bowl. When she arrived home, before doing anything else, she would sit for 5 minutes. She would strike the bowl once and listen to the sound from the moment of the strike until the very last, faintest vibration faded into absolute silence. Her only task was to follow that sound all the way home to silence. She said the tone was like a gentle broom, sweeping all the scattered, chaotic thought fragments into a single, flowing stream that then poured into a still pool. The quality of her mind after this ritual was not empty, but coherent. The frantic, jagged energy was replaced by a resonant calm. She had not addressed a single thought directly. She had changed the medium in which they existed. She had filled her mental room with a single, pure tone, and everything else had to rearrange itself around that. This practice is available to you in countless forms. It could be the silent repetition of a phrase of care. It could be visually imagining a healing light filling your body with each breath. It could be listening to the distant hum of the world outside your window as a single, continuous chord. The key is to engage in an activity that, by its very nature, induces a state of softness, unity, and ease. You are not attacking the negative thought, you are dissolving the tense, reactive ground that makes it so powerful. As you lie here now, you can begin this alchemy. Bring a gentle attention to your heart center, in the middle of your chest. Don't strain. Just imagine that space. With each in-breath, imagine you are drawing in a soft, cool, silvery mist, the very essence of peace. With each out-breath, imagine that mist gently expanding from your heart, spreading through your chest, down your arms, through your torso, legs, all the way to the tips of your fingers and toes. You are not forcing relaxation. You are inviting it, by changing the inner atmosphere with the breath. If thoughts arise, let them be like birds flying through this mist. They don't disturb it, they are enveloped by it. Your sole task is to keep breathing in the cool silver and breathing out the expansion. You are the sky, becoming vaster and more still. This practice of relaxing the thought process is a deep form of self-compassion. It acknowledges that a mind in pain needs soothing, not solving. It is the spiritual equivalent of running a feverish brow. You are not yelling at the fever to break, you are providing the cool cloth, the quiet room, the supportive presence. In the spacious, softened atmosphere you cultivate, individual negative thoughts lose their urgency and their identity. They become mere weather in your now vast, compassionate sky. Let us continue. We have prepared the ground, learned to let go, seen the thorn clearly, and softened the atmosphere. Now we arrive at a point that requires great discernment, a tool held in reserve for moments of genuine urgency. In the Buddha's gradual training, this is the final step. The forceful suppression of an unwholesome thought. It is crucial to understand this not as a first resort, but as a last one, the mental equivalent of a fire extinguisher behind glass. You do not use it for a candle flame, you use it when the curtains are catching fire. This is not about the daily annoyances or passing moods. This is for those rare, acute moments when a harmful thought has such momentum that it is milliseconds away from translating into speech or action that will cause irreversible harm. Its purpose is not to destroy the emotion, but to create a critical pause, a split-second gap in the momentum of compulsion. I call this the conscious interruption. Imagine you are walking smoothly down a steep, slick path. A thought arises, and you begin to identify with it, to lean into it. Suddenly, you realize you are not just walking, you are falling, accelerating toward a cliff edge. The conscious interruption is the act of violently throwing your weight backwards, of deliberately falling onto the path to stop your slide, even if it bruises you. It is a drastic, physical intervention to prevent a far worse fate. The bruise is the shock to your system, the prevented fall is the preservation of your peace and your relationships. This requires profound self-honesty and the foundation of the previous practices. Without that foundation, this becomes mere repression, storing energy for an later, more explosive release. You must be able to recognize the true cliff edge. Is this a thought that, if followed, will lead to saying something that severs a bond? To an action that violates your integrity? If the answer is yes, then, and only then, you may need to deploy this inner emergency brake. I had to learn this the hard way, early in my teaching. A person came to me with a grievance, publicly challenging my understanding in a way that felt deeply disrespectful and personal. A hot wire of rage shot through me. I felt the words forming on my tongue, clever, cutting words designed to humiliate and win. I saw the cliff edge. If I spoke, I would be trading my commitment to compassion for a moment of petty victory, and I would lose that person's trust forever. The other methods were too slow. So, I deployed the interruption. I did something utterly unexpected in the quiet hall. I brought my open palm down on the wooden floor beside me with a sharp, loud crack. The sound was so sudden, so physical, it shattered the momentum of my anger like glass. In the stunned silence that followed, both in the room and in my mind, I found the gap. I took 3 deep, audible breaths, feeling the shock in my stinging palm. Then, from that empty, clear space, I was able to respond, not from the rage, but from a calmer place. That is an important challenge, I said. Thank you. Let me consider it. The confrontation dissolved. The conscious interruption created the space for a wiser response to emerge. Now, let me share an original story about a young lawyer. She was a fierce debater, and her mind was a blade. In a high-stakes negotiation, the other side played a deeply unfair, personal trick. A wave of betrayal and fury washed over her. She felt her face grow hot, her prepared arguments vanishing, replaced by a torrent of retaliatory threats. She knew if she uttered them, the deal, and her professional reputation, would be destroyed. In that second, she used a technique she practiced. Under the table, out of sight, she dug the fingernails of her left hand hard into her palm. The sharp, precise pain was her interruption. It grounded her fury in a physical sensation, breaking the identification with the emotional storm. She then visualized a thick, clear pane of glass descending between herself and the other negotiator. She watched their smug expressions through this glass, as if they were in a silent film. This mental barrier gave her the detachment to pick up her pen, write a single word, breathe, on her notepad, and then, from that regained center, continue with a steely, unshakable calm that ultimately won her the day. She used a physical shock to create a mental gap, and then used a visual metaphor to maintain the space she needed. This practice is not for everyone, and not for every day. But knowing it exists is a comfort. It means that even in the white-hot grip of a potentially destructive impulse, you are not powerless. You have a last-ditch tool. The key is to follow the interruption immediately with one of the softer practices. You create the gap with force, but you must fill the gap with grace, with a breath, a mantra, a sensation. Otherwise, the thought will simply regroup and charge again. As you rest in the safety of this moment, you can practice a gentle version of this, to understand the mechanism. Recall a very minor recent irritation. Now, as you think of it, deliberately and suddenly change your physical posture. If you are lying down, sit bolt upright. If you are sitting, stand up. Make the movement decisive. Notice how the abrupt physical shift disrupts the flow of the thought. It's a miniature interruption. Then, immediately place your attention on your feet firmly on the floor, or on the new feeling in your spine. You have created a gap, and filled it with presence. You are learning that you can, through conscious will, interrupt an automatic pattern. It is a small rehearsal of a great power. The power to choose, even in the storm, not to be swept away. Remember, the Buddha's authority on the mind comes from his exhaustive mapping of its territory. He knew that sometimes, the path requires not just a gentle stroll, but the skilled use of an ice axe to stop a fatal slide. This step acknowledges the raw power of our mental habits, and gives us a dignified, disciplined way to meet that power without being destroyed by it. It is the ultimate act of protection. For yourself and for others. Let us continue. Having explored tools for both gentle tending and urgent intervention, let us now step back and consider the stage upon which all this drama plays out, awareness itself. This is the silent, foundational principle woven through every Buddhist teaching on the mind. Awareness is not a thought, not an emotion. It is the prior condition, the screen upon which the movie of your experience is projected. All our practice, the cultivating, the letting go, the seeing, the softening, the interrupting, is not about changing the movie's content so much as it is about remembering you are in the theater, watching. You are not the raging character on the screen, you are the aware space witnessing the story. I call this the principle of the lighthouse. Imagine your mind with all its weather, the storms of anger, the fog of worry, the dazzling sunbursts of joy. These are all happening on the surface of the ocean. They are real, they are powerful, they can toss ships about. But deep beneath the surface, anchored to the solid bedrock of the earth, stands the lighthouse. It is unmoving. Its light turns, constant and steady, illuminating whatever passes on the surface, storm waves or calm swells, without being disturbed by any of it. Your awareness is that lighthouse. The beam of your attention may sweep across different thoughts, the weather. But the structure of awareness itself remains rooted and undisturbed. Our suffering arises when we forget we are the lighthouse and believe we are the wave, crashing against the rocks in despair. The entire purpose of the Buddha's path is to help us rediscover our identity as the lighthouse. I saw a beautiful, simple example of this with a potter. He was a man of great skill but also great self-criticism. Each piece he made, he would see only the tiny flaw. He was lost in the waves of not good enough. One day, his apprentice asked him a question while he was centering a lump of clay on the wheel. "How do you know when the clay is perfectly centered?" The potter placed his hands on the spinning mass and said, "You don't listen with your ears. You feel it with your whole being. When it is centered, there is no vibration. There is only a silent, still core, and everything moves around it in perfect harmony." As he said it, he realized the teaching for himself. His critical thoughts were vibrations, off-screenness. His true center was the silent, still awareness that could feel those vibrations without being them. From that day, he began a practice. Before judging a pot, he would close his eyes and place his hands on it, not to feel its shape, but to find his own center. If he felt the vibration of criticism, he would return his attention to the still core within himself. Only from that place would he look again. His work didn't become perfect, but his suffering about it diminished profoundly. He had found his lighthouse. Let me share another original story, about a taxi driver in a vast, gridlocked city. His life was a cacophony of horns, dispatcher static, and demanding passengers. He described his mind as a mirror slammed by muddy rain, nothing clear, only splatter and noise. He couldn't find the lighthouse. Then, he noticed something. Between fares, there was always a moment, sometimes 10 seconds, sometimes 2 minutes, of silence in the cab. He decided to claim those moments. He called them island times. His rule was simple: in that silence, he would not pick up his phone, he would not plan his route. He would simply look out the windshield and notice one thing that was utterly still. The corner of a building against the sky. A single leaf on a median tree. The unblinking eye of a traffic camera on its pole. He would rest his gaze there and feel his own breath, equally still, in his chest. In those micro-moments, he was not the gridlock, he was the awareness noticing a fragment of stillness within the gridlock. These tiny, accumulated island times began to build a felt sense of the lighthouse inside him. The chaos remained, but he was no longer adrift in it. He had found a fixed point to which he could return, breath by breath. This is the practice behind all practices. The returning to the aware center. You can do this now. Thoughts may be present. Emotions may be present. Sense perceptions, the feel of the air, the sound of my voice, are present. Can you notice that all of these are objects appearing in your experience? Now, sense the one who is noticing. That is awareness itself. It has no shape, no opinion. It simply is. Like the sky that holds the clouds, like the theater that holds the play, like the lighthouse that holds the light. You are that. The Buddha's radical insight was that liberation is not about attaining something new, but about recognizing this ancient, always present fact. When you operate from this understanding, the other tools become graceful and effortless. Cultivating wholesome ground is choosing what to plant in the field of your awareness. Paying no mind is choosing not to water the weeds. Seeing the disadvantage is recognizing which plants are poisonous. Relaxing the process is tending the overall health of the soil. The conscious interruption is urgently uprooting a deadly plant before it seeds. But the field itself, the aware, knowing space, is always untouched, always fertile, always capable of new growth. Your identity shifts from being a frantic gardener fighting the wilderness to being the benevolent landowner who knows the land's true, enduring nature. Rest here for a few moments. Let everything be as it is. Thoughts, sensations, sounds. Don't try to change any of it. Simply ask inwardly, what is it that knows all this? Don't search for a conceptual answer. Feel for the knowing presence itself. It is closer than your next breath. It is the silence between my words. It is the space in which your entire life unfolds. Each time you remember this, you are coming home. You are returning to the lighthouse, and from its height, the stormy seas of emotion, however turbulent, can never truly threaten you again. They are just seas. And you are the steadfast light. Let us continue. Now that we have touched the still point of awareness, let's bring our understanding into the flow of daily life. The wisdom of Buddhism is not a relic for quiet moments alone. It is a living science for navigating the complex, beautiful, and often challenging dance of human relationship. Our strongest emotions, anger, attachment, pride, fear, most often arise in connection with others. Therefore, our deepest practice happens there, in the space between me and you. The Buddha's teachings provide a profound framework for this, which we can explore through a different lens. The practice of seeing others not as external causes of our suffering, but as mirrors reflecting our own inner state. I call this the mirror of relationship. When someone speaks to us with harshness, it is like they are holding up a mirror to a part of ourselves that feels fragile, unworthy, or equally harsh. Our instinct is to smash the mirror, to attack the holder. But the practice is to first look at the reflection, not through it at the other person. What does this interaction reveal about a tender spot within me? What old story does it touch? This is not to excuse unkind behavior in others, but to liberate ourselves from being perpetually at the mercy of their actions. It transfers the locus of control from the unpredictable outer world to the workable inner world. When you clean the mirror on your side, the reflection changes, regardless of what the other person is doing. I witnessed a profound example of this in a family conflict. A woman was locked in a years-long Cold War with her sister over the care of their aging mother. Every conversation was a minefield of old resentments. She saw her sister as selfish, stubborn, the sole obstacle to peace. I suggested a simple, almost absurd practice. Before their next call, she was to write down 3 qualities she admired in her sister from their childhood, before the conflict. She chose, she was brave. She loved animals. She made me laugh. During the call, when she felt her anger rise, she did not engage the argument. Instead, she silently repeated one of those phrases like a mantra: she loves animals. She loves animals. She was looking at a different reflection, an older, truer mirror. It didn't solve the logistical issues, but it changed the atmosphere inside her. She reported that for the first time, she heard the fear in her sister's voice, not just the stubbornness. The mirror was no longer just reflecting my enemy, it was reflecting a scared person who loves animals. From that shift, a real conversation became possible. Now, let me share an original story from a corporate setting. A project manager was saddled with a team member he found utterly incompetent and lazy, a constant source of rage. He rehearsed complaints daily, seeing this person as a boulder blocking the road to success. During a mindfulness retreat, he was introduced to the concept of beginner's mind. As an experiment, he decided to apply it to his problem colleague. For 1 week, he vowed to observe this person as if he were a scientist discovering a new species, with no prior judgments. He looked for facts, not interpretations. At 9:05 a.m., he arrives. He sighs 3 times before opening his email. He asks clarifying questions in meetings, often the same one twice. What he saw surprised him. The laziness looked more like overwhelm. The incompetence looked like a desperate fear of making a mistake and a lack of training. The mirror was reflecting not a villain, but a struggling human. This didn't magically make the employee competent, but it dissolved the manager's toxic rage, replacing it with a clearer, more pragmatic, and ultimately more effective sense of what the person actually needed: clear directives and patient training. The boulder in the road became a person to be guided, and the path forward opened. This practice transforms conflict into curiosity. When irritation arises with a partner, a child, a stranger, instead of launching the mental story of what's wrong with them, pause. Turn the mirror inward. Ask gently, what in me is feeling threatened? What need of mine feels unmet? What old wound is this touching? This is not self-blame. It is self-illumination. You are using the friction of relationship to polish your own awareness. The Buddha's teachings on right speech and right action flow naturally from this internal clarity. When you are not reacting from a raw, mirrored wound, you can respond from wisdom and care. As you rest here, you can practice this in memory. Recall a minor recent friction with someone. Now, imagine the scene like a movie, but pause it. Step out of your own role. Be the compassionate director. Look at your own character in the scene. What does their facial expression, their body language, reveal about their inner state? Worry? Fear of being disrespected? A need to be heard? Now look at the other character. What might their behavior reveal about their inner state? You are not justifying anything. You are simply looking into both mirrors. Feel the expansion that comes from this dual perspective. The tight knot of me versus you begins to loosen. You are cultivating the greatest peacemaking skill, the ability to hold multiple truths at once. This relational mindfulness is where the rubber meets the road. It is easy to feel peaceful in solitude. The true test, and the true opportunity, is to remain a lighthouse amid the waves caused by other ships. By seeing others as mirrors, you stop demanding that the sea be calm. You simply ensure your light remains steady, which in turn helps all ships navigate more safely. Your peace becomes not a private possession, but a radiance that touches every relationship you have. Let us continue. We've explored the inner lighthouse and the mirrors of relationship. Now, let's turn to a concept that ties all of this together, a concept that is the very heartbeat of the Buddha's wisdom: impermanence. Anicca. This is not a bleak philosophy of loss, but a liberating truth of constant flow. Everything that arises, passes away. Every thought, every emotion, every sensation, every circumstance. Our suffering is not caused by impermanence itself, but by our deep-seated, often unconscious, resistance to it. We want the pleasant to stay, the unpleasant to go, and the neutral to be interesting. We build mental fortresses around things that are, by their nature, as stable as a cloud. The practice of embracing impermanence is the practice of learning to float in the river of change, rather than fruitlessly trying to build a dam. I call this the practice of the riverbank. Imagine you are sitting on the bank of a wide, powerful river. Floating down the river are all the objects of your experience. A blossom, a joyful thought, a tangled branch, a worry, a glittering piece of mica, a memory, a sodden log, a physical pain. Your habit is to jump into the cold water and try to chase the blossom, cling to it, or to fight the tangled branch, pushing it under. You exhaust yourself in the current. The practice is to remain on the bank. To see each object float into your field of awareness, watch it pass before you, and let it float on by. You don't have to like the tangled branch. You simply acknowledge, a tangled branch is passing. You don't have to mourn the blossom. You note, a blossom is passing. Your position on the bank is your awareness. The river is impermanence itself. Peace is found not in controlling the river's flow, but in deepening your trust in the stability of the bank. I learned this from watching the seasons in an old orchard. There was one particular apple tree I loved. In spring, it was a cascade of fragile pink and white blossoms. I would try to hold the beauty, photograph it, grasp it with my mind, already saddened by the coming fall. In summer, I'd worry about the forming fruit. Was it enough? Was it healthy? In autumn, I'd gorge on the apples, trying to hold the taste, and then feel empty when they were gone. I was jumping into the river with every season. One year, I simply sat under the tree through the cycles. I watched the blossoms fall without clutching. I saw the small, hard apples form without demand. I tasted a single apple with full attention, not thinking of the next one. And when the last leaf fell, I felt not emptiness, but a quiet, clean spaciousness. The tree was not gone, it was simply in its winter phase, resting. By staying on the bank, I experienced each moment fully without the suffering of clinging to what was already becoming something else. The tree taught me anicca more than any scripture. Let me share an original story about a clockmaker. He lived in a world of perfect, mechanical permanence. Gears meshed, pendulums swung in eternal rhythm, his job was to conquer time's slippage. When he began to experience anxiety, it manifested as a terror of imprecision, of things falling out of order. The river of his mind felt like a chaotic, broken clock. His meditation was to sit in his workshop surrounded by hundreds of ticking clocks, but to listen not to the ticks, but to the silences between them. He would focus on the tiny gap after one tick and before the next. In that gap, he found no tick, no talk, no measurement, only a still, open space. He realized each moment of experience was like that, a discrete event, a tick, a thought, a feeling, followed by a gap of pure possibility before the next event arose. His anxiety was his desperate attempt to link all the ticks into one solid, controllable line. But by resting in the gaps, he saw the impermanent, fleeting nature of each tick of worry. They arose and passed in the vast silence. He learned to reside in the silent bank between the ticks of his thoughts, where the river of time itself seemed to hold its breath, and in that breath, he found a peace more profound than any precision. This practice is a direct application of the core Buddhist principle of non-attachment. Non-attachment is not cold indifference. It is the wise and loving understanding that you cannot truly possess a river, a blossom, a feeling, or a person. You can only meet them with openness, appreciate them fully as they are, and then let them continue on their way. This transforms grief into tenderness, and anxiety into alert presence. Right now, you can practice with the river of your breath. Feel the beginning of the in-breath arise. Follow its journey to its peak. Now, feel it pass away, becoming the out-breath. Follow the out-breath all the way to its end, its passing into a pause. In that pause, on the bank, rest. Then observe the next breath arise, uncommanded. Each breath is a perfect lesson in impermanence, arising, lingering, passing. Thoughts are the same. Feelings are the same. Sounds in the room are the same. You are the silent, aware bank, and all of this is the river flowing past. You don't need to change the river's content. You just need to trust your seat on the bank. When you deeply internalize this, you begin to meet all of life with a lighter touch. The difficult meeting at work is a passing weather system in the sky of your day. The pain in your knee is a passing sensation in the field of the body. Even a period of profound sadness is recognized as a season in the heart, not a permanent state. This doesn't negate the reality of the experience, but it removes the additional, crushing weight of the belief that it will last forever. You trade the solid, heavy world of nouns for the fluid, light world of verbs. You are not a static being having experiences. You are the aware space in which the eternal verb of life is constantly unfolding, passing, and renewing itself. This is the ultimate safety, the ultimate freedom offered by the Buddha's profound insight into the nature of things. Let us come to our final shared understanding. We have wandered through many clearings. Tending the inner garden, letting go, seeing clearly, softening the atmosphere, making conscious interruptions, finding the lighthouse, seeing others as mirrors, and resting on the riverbank of impermanence. All of these are facets of a single, luminous truth offered by the Buddha, that peace is not a distant destination, but the fundamental nature of a mind that is understood. We do not create peace. We uncover it, by gently removing the layers of misunderstanding, resistance, and identification that obscure it. Think of it as the principle of the clear sky. We began with the metaphor of the mind as a sky with weather. Now, we see the full picture. The sky does not need to be made clear. It is inherently clear, vast, and spacious. Storms, clouds, and brilliant sunsets are all temporary, passing phenomena within the sky. They are not the sky. Our practice is the patient, compassionate work of learning to differentiate the weather from the sky itself. Every technique we've discussed is a way to stop confusing ourselves with the storm cloud, so we can rest back into our true identity as the sky, the aware, open, boundless space that holds everything without being damaged by any of it. This is not a philosophical idea. It is a felt sense, a homecoming. I witnessed this homecoming in a man who had survived a great personal tragedy. For years, he described his mind as a landscape permanently scarred by a wildfire, charred, barren, and silent. He believed his peace had been burned away forever. He practiced not to feel better, but simply to honor what he had lost. He practiced the softening of the atmosphere, sending metta to his own scorched heart. He practiced sitting on the riverbank, watching the memories float by without drowning in them. For a long time, he only felt the charred earth. Then, one early morning, he was sitting in his garden after a light rain. He was watching the steam rise from the warm soil, a common phenomenon. But in that moment, he saw it differently. The steam wasn't covering the sky, it was rising into it. The sky was receiving it, holding it, and the steam was dissolving into the sky's vastness. In a flash, he felt it inside. The grief, the loss, the scorched feeling, it wasn't the totality of him. It was like the steam, a phenomenon arising within a much vaster, clearer, and utterly untouched inner sky. The tragedy was real, the scar was real, but he was not the scar. He was the space that contained the scar. That realization didn't erase his pain, but it ended his imprisonment within it. He had glimpsed the clear sky of his own nature. This is the ultimate purpose of the Buddhist teachings on the mind. They are not a life hack for better moods. They are a detailed map out of the prison of mistaken identity. You are not the thinker. You are the awareness before the thought. You are not the feeler. You are the spaciousness that allows the feeling. You are not the damaged one. You are the wholeness that can include damage without being defined by it. Let me leave you with one final, original story, a modern parable. In a bustling city, there was a master weaver who created the most beautiful, intricate tapestries. People came from afar to see her work. One day, a critic pointed out a single, jarringly wrong thread in the center of her latest masterpiece, a thread of harsh, discordant color. The weaver was devastated. She saw nothing but the flaw. She tried to pick it out, but it was woven too deeply. She considered discarding the entire tapestry. Heartbroken, she rolled it up and put it away. Years later, her young apprentice, exploring the studio, unrolled the tapestry. "Master," she cried out. "This is the most stunning one of all." The weaver, now older, came over, expecting to see the old flaw. But the apprentice wasn't looking at the center. She had hung the tapestry sideways, and from this new angle, the flaw was not a mistake at all. It was the brilliant, daring highlight in a much larger, more beautiful pattern that had been invisible from the old, fixed perspective. The weaver had been so close, so identified with the wrongness of one thread, she had missed the magnificent, complete design. Our negative thoughts, our traumas, our flaws, they are like that thread. From the ego's fixed, close-up perspective, they ruin everything. But from the vantage point of the clear sky of awareness, from the wider angle of a compassionate and timeless perspective, they are integrated into a larger, more meaningful whole. They become part of the unique and beautiful tapestry of a human life fully lived. This is the invitation of Monk's Temple. It is an invitation to shift your angle of perception. To roll out the tapestry of your experience and have the courage to look at it from the side of awareness, not from the cramped viewpoint of the judging mind. As our time together comes to a close, let this understanding sink in not as a thought, but as a feeling. You are here. You are aware. You are listening. Beneath the content of your life, the stories, the roles, the pains, and the joys, there is the simple, undeniable fact of your own presence. That presence is like the clear sky. It is like the stable bank. It is the lighthouse. It has been here all along. The practices we've explored are your tools, your gentle reminders. Use them not as weapons against yourself, but as kind friends who help you remember the sky when the clouds are thick. When you forget, as we all do, simply begin again. That is the whole of the path, a gentle, endless returning to the truth of this moment, just as it is. Thank you for sharing this journey of peace. This has been a sanctuary we built together with our attention. If this refuge has been a source of comfort or insight for you, I warmly and gently invite you to subscribe to Monk's Temple. In doing so, you plant a seed of mindfulness for your future self, ensuring you can always find your way back to this clear sky, this steady bank, this peace that has been, and always will be, your true nature. May you carry this understanding with you. May you be gentle with yourself. May you recognize the clear sky within, in all people, in all moments. Good night, and be at peace.